I was a harlot, subject to public humiliation, when a young general came to my rescue. He took off his cloak and wrapped it around me. While men had always stripped my clothes from me, he was the first to put them on me. To repay his kindness, I became his maid. He showed me tenderness and care, but never touched me. 3 months after he went off to war, his head was displayed on the city wall by an enemy general. The emperor surrendered, offering up the city and women. I went into hiding and became a tribute maid in the enemy's land. I wanted to find out who killed my beloved.
1.
When I learned of Gu Jiuzhou's death, I had a high fever for 3 days. Snow also fell for 3 days, and his head hung on the city wall, exposed to the biting wind and snow. The heavy snow blanketed the entire capital, turning it into a white expanse. The streets were empty, and the guards at the city gate had slacked off, hiding somewhere. Crunching through the snow, I climbed the city wall, carefully holding onto the stone railing as I took down Gu Jiuzhou's head. He looked as if he were asleep. Snowflakes clung to his thick eyelashes, and his once rosy lips had turned pale. Fortunately, it was winter, so his wounds had dried and hadn't decayed. It was chilling to think that Gu Jiuzhou had fought so hard to protect his land, but no one had come to collect his body. I held back my tears and said to him, "General, I'll take you home." At that moment, the Gu residence was desolate, like an empty house after a fallen tree has scattered the monkeys. I buried Gu Jiuzhou's head under the pear tree in the backyard, where he used to stand lost in thought. Without any tools, I dug a hole with my bare hands. The mix of blood and snow was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. After covering the grave, I bowed deeply and silently promised, "General, I'll come back to see you when the pear blossoms bloom." After doing all this, I left the Gu residence through the side gate and entered a small house in Yong'an Alley. Uncle Qin and Aunt Qin were waiting for me. "Miss Shuewansi, are you sure about this? Once you go, there's no turning back." Their daughter, hiding in a dark corner, watched me anxiously. I was chosen in the capital to become a tribute maid to Northern Qi. Uncle Qin's daughter happened to be on the list. Everyone knew that tribute maids were sent off with no return, and no respectable family would willingly send their daughter to such a fate. I was different. Before meeting Gu Jiuzhou, I was already a harlot. Yes, I'm sure. From now on, Shuewansi no longer exists. I am Qin Yuan. Uncle Qin and Aunt Qin knelt with their daughter. "Miss Wansi, thank you. I helped them up. Actually, I should be thanking them for giving me the opportunity to get close to the person who killed Gu Jiuzhou and further insulted him."
2.
3 days later, I took the place of Qin Yuan and arrived in the capital of Northern Qi with the envoy. We were settled in a shabby tent, awaiting selection. My target was the great General Xiao Yan of Northern Qi. The highest-ranking individuals were chosen first. Other tribute maids huddled together in fear, but when Xiao Yan lifted the tent flap, I stood straight and cast a flirtatious glance. When our eyes met, his gaze flickered, and his voice was deep. "What's your name?" "Qin Yuan." His firm hand gripped my chin. "You have some looks." He turned to the envoy and said, "This one." The envoy nodded repeatedly. I breathed a sigh of relief, surprised at how easy it was. In the elegantly decorated bedroom, a complete tiger skin was spread on the concubine's chair. I lightly brushed it, and the door creaked open. I turned back to him and performed a curtsy. Xiao Yan smiled slightly. "Do you like it?" "I've never seen one." He reached out, wrapped his arm around my slender waist, and pulled me to his chest. "If you serve me well tonight, I'll reward you." As Xiao Yan's lips descended, I turned my head to avoid him. He tugged at the thin silk draped over me, pulling it down to my arm and exposing the blooming peony on my back. He squinted. "Who painted this?" "A painter." My heart skipped a beat as Gu Jiuzhou's face flashed in my mind. Xiao Yan circled my waist from behind and kissed my back. "Does he know your body is as soft as water?" I turned around, wrapped my arms around his shoulders, and whispered in his ear, "From now on, only you will know." This art of pretending to resist was taught to me by the Madam of Zui Fenglu. 3. Years ago, my father drugged me and sold me to Zue Fenglu. He promised that once my elder brother married, he would come to redeem me. I refused to entertain clients and was locked in the storeroom for a whole month by the madam. She mocked me. Do you really believe what men say? My father said he would come to redeem me. He will. She scoffed and turned to leave, closing the door behind her. I tried to escape twice but was caught and beaten mercilessly. The madam's thugs were brutal, showing no mercy with their fists and feet. They only stopped when I vomited blood. In the dark storeroom, the smell of blood was thick. I lay on the cold floor while a few rats in the corner squeaked. They eyed the food the madam had thrown in. I grabbed the food and ate, determined to survive and escape. On my third attempt, I finally succeeded. The dilapidated house at home was transformed into a courtyard. My father was shocked to see my face and still let me in. That night, I overheard my new sister-in-law criticizing my brother. Your sister has been to Zue Fenglu. I can't live under the same roof with a harlot. What if the madam comes looking for compensation? We have no money left. It was all used to build the house. Their voices grew fainter. Suddenly, hurried footsteps approached as my father and the madam's thugs burst in. My father's face was a mask of anger. Don't blame me. Once you enter the world of prostitution, you are a prostitute for life. You are no longer a member of the Shui family. I finally understood that the madam's sneer had been at my foolishness. Resigned to my fate, I accepted her training and became the top courtesan of Zue Fenglu. At the moment of the sharp pain below, I came to my senses. Xiao Yan's kiss landed on my forehead. Is it uncomfortable? He didn't stop his movements. His eyes were filled with desire and destruction. His voice was hoarse. Endure it. He was my first client and, if all went well, would be my last. I bit my lip, hiding my discomfort, burying my face in his neck. Tears fell, mingling with his sweat. Gu Jiuzhou, look at me now. When I wanted to give myself to you, you didn't want me. Now, I lie beneath the man who killed you, desperately trying to please him. Don't be sad. I'm avenging you.
4.
As the heavy rain ceased, I was covered in a fine layer of fragrant sweat. Xiao Yan sat on the edge of the bed, fastening his belt. I rested my head lightly against his back, and he turned to look at me for a moment. I guessed that my face must be flushed and my expression satisfied. The madam from Zue Fenglu had once said that women were most alluring at such moments. Xiao Yan kissed my cheek and said, "Get some rest." I grabbed his wrist. "General, aren't you staying?"
No.
He was already at the door when he turned to say, "If you need anything, you can ask Chui Ping to do it." I nodded, confirming he had left before calling Chui Ping's name. "Miss, do you have any instructions?" "Get some water." "I want to bathe." "Certainly." I dismissed Chui Ping. Before Chui Ping left, she asked again, "Miss, are you sure you don't need my help?"
No.
In the bathtub, I sprinkled fragrant powder and scrubbed my body vigorously, trying to wash away Xiao Yan's scent. The copper mirror behind me reflected the peony flower on my back, a design made to cover scars, painted by Gu Jiuzhou. He had shown me kindness and care, unlike the other men I had met at Zue Fenglu. At Zue Fenglu, courtesans were ranked from low to high. Low-class courtesans were considered available to anyone. Middle-class courtesans had both beauty and talent and only served distinguished guests. The highest class, like me, were exceptionally gifted and carefully trained by the madam, waiting for a benefactor willing to spend lavishly. On my first night on stage, the 9th prince chose me at a glance and offered to buy me as a concubine. Everyone knew he was cruel and violent. The last woman he bought was carried out of the courtyard horizontally. The madam hesitated, but he brought a whole box of gold to Zue Fenglu. His servants bound me, and I struggled, hitting and kicking. He lashed me with a long whip and stomped on me. Nobody dares refuse me like this. Wansi, don't push your luck. A single lash was enough to tear my skin. The madam, with a sorrowful face, pleaded, "Wansi, just submit to the 9th prince. You will live a life of luxury and honor." She had once promised me the freedom to choose my benefactor, but it seemed she had gone back on her word. I stubbornly said, "No." The ninth prince's whip came down harder. Still unsatisfied, he ordered his men to throw me into the street. "I want you to know the consequences of defying me." A torrential rain began to fall, and I was covered in mud. My blood mixed with the dirt, making my wounds ache more. I had no strength left to stand. A man passed by, pushing through my disheveled hair. "Isn't this Miss Shui Wanxi from Zui Fenglu?" "Go away." I recognized him. He was a regular at Zui Fenglu, but his wealth couldn't afford me. He gritted his teeth, glanced around furtively, and dragged me into a dark alley. His greasy hands unfastened my clothes, and his mouth came close to my ear. I turned my head and bit down hard. The man jumped up and slapped me. "You're in such a state and still trying to act tough?" He tried to bend over again when a clear male voice floated over. "What are you doing?"
5.
A righteous figure appeared before me. The young general in full armor. "How dare you publicly humiliate a woman in the presence of the emperor? Come, follow me to the yamen." The man protested. "She is a courtesan from Zui Fenglu, available to anyone. If you don't believe me, ask around." The young general looked at me, took off his cloak, and wrapped it around me. I was surrounded by the pleasant scent of wood. The men who came to Zui Fenglu only wanted to take my clothes off, but he was the only one who put them on me. "Even if she is a courtesan, she has the right to refuse." His words struck my heart one by one. The man retreated in panic and fled. The young general picked me up, his hands stained with blood. "Don't dirty yourself. It's fine." I mustered all my strength to stand up, thanked him, and leaned against the wall as I moved slowly, each drop of blood falling to the ground. In pain and weakness, I slid down the wall and knelt on the ground. The young general approached and asked, "Where do you live?" "I'll take you home." Even though he had just saved me, I couldn't trust him easily. I pushed his hand away and untied the cloak. "I have no home. You can have your cloak back." "No need." He noticed my stubbornness and paused with his hand in midair. I tried several times to stand up, but the pain from my wounds was unbearable, and I couldn't move. He swallowed and said, "If you continue like this, you will lose too much blood. It's better to come with me. I'll find a doctor to treat you."
No.
Men like him were rarely kind-hearted. Their favors always came with a price. Finally, I managed to stand, but only took a few steps before my strength gave out. The man sighed lightly and came over to pick me up again. "I'll take you to my residence. Don't worry, I mean no harm. I'm General Gu Jiuzhou of the Northern Frontier."
6.
General of the Northern Frontier? That title sounded familiar. My vision blurred and I fainted. When I woke up, I was lying on a bed, and a maid was applying medicine to my wounds. "Miss, don't move. This wound might leave a scar." I planned to leave the Gu residence once my injuries healed a bit. Before I left, I wanted to make sure I owed no one anything. When I was thrown out of Zui Fenglu, the ninth prince had his men strip me of everything valuable. The only thing left was a jade piece I had kept hidden in my clothing, a keepsake for my mother. I intended to pawn it to buy medicine for Gu Jiuzhou. Not far from the Gu residence, men from the ninth prince's entourage blocked my way. "Miss, it's not easy to find you. Come with us to see the ninth prince." "I'm not going. Your contract is in the prince's possession. You have no choice." A shadow emerged from the side, kicking away the ninth prince's men and angrily asking, "Who dares cause trouble at the general's residence?" Gu Jiuzhou swung his sword, and the men fled in panic. If I had left decisively at that moment, perhaps none of the subsequent events would have happened. Thinking of this, my heart felt as cold as the bath water. Chui Ping knocked at the door. "Miss, it's getting late. After you finish your bath, you should rest." "Okay." I stood up and put on my nightgown. She entered and handed me a bowl of medicine. "This is a contraceptive soup." I didn't ask any questions and drank it all in one go. I dreamed all night. In the dream, Gu Jiuzhou stood under the pear tree, looking back and smiling at me. I reached out to him, but he turned into mist and drifted away. Waking with a splitting headache, I propped myself up, feeling a lump in my chest. Outside the door, someone softly said, "The general has ordered her to be sent away." My heart sank. One night wasn't enough. I needed to think of a way to stay with him for a longer time.
7.
When I returned to the courtesan's quarters, someone asked about my experiences from the previous night. I smiled and remained silent, finding a corner to sit. An envoy entered and asked if anyone among us could dance. He said, "Tonight, the great general of Beiqi is hosting a banquet and needs someone to perform a dance." I wouldn't miss any chance to be seen by Xiao Yan, so I stood up, bowed, and said softly, "My lord, I have studied dance." "Are you proficient?" General Xiao is the nephew of the king of Beiqi. The king has no sons and treats him like his own. "You must not be disrespectful." "Rest assured, my lord. I have practiced for several years and will not be disrespectful." The envoy appraised me from head to toe and said, "Change into your dance attire and rehearse with the musicians." Yes. I changed into my dance attire, a delicate yellow garment as thin as a cicada's wing, with my jade-like figure partially visible. After finishing my makeup, I twirled before the copper mirror. The peony flower on my back was half visible, and the envoy stared with wide eyes. "My lord, how do I look?" After a moment, he came to his senses and swallowed hard. "Very good, very good." He patted my shoulder and instructed, "This dance attire seems made just for you. Perform well." I followed the maid through the corridor and arrived at the pavilion by the lake. The guests had not yet taken their seats, and I had already developed a thin layer of sweat on my palms. The last time I danced was at Gu Jiuzhou's birthday. He said he did not like celebrating his birthday because his mother died in childbirth. His birthday was also the anniversary of his mother's death. He looked up at the sky with a melancholic expression, and I felt a sense of sympathy. My own mother had also passed away. She was the only person who had ever cared for me. Outside the courtyard, someone played a long flute, and I followed the melody, dancing gracefully beneath the pear tree. Gu Jiuzhou pulled back his thoughts and relaxed his brow. Halfway through the dance, the 9th prince stormed in, holding my contract of sale and gripping my wrist. "Come with me to the residence." Gu Jiuzhou stepped in front of me. "Your Highness, traditionally, a contract of sale requires signatures from both parties. Did Miss Wansi sign a contract?" The 9th prince hesitated. Gu Jiuzhou continued, "If your Highness still has doubts, I can consult the emperor." "No need." The 9th prince cast a cold glance, slammed the contract onto the table, and said through gritted teeth, "We'll see about this." Had Gu Jiuzhou not intervened for me, he would not have offended the 9th prince, nor would he have been coerced into leading a campaign while ill, eventually resulting in his death in battle. Perhaps I was born unlucky, unworthy of any warmth or affection. Memories surged in my mind, and I gripped the fan tightly, my fingertips turning white. As I took the stage, I noticed a familiar face sitting to the right. It was Qi Ming, Gu Jiuzhou's former deputy. He recognized me too, his eyes showing a hint of surprise. My heart raced like a drum, and I forced myself to stay calm. As the silk and bamboo music began, I danced gracefully. Xiao Yan, who arrived late, took a seat. I danced in front of the guests, swirling my water sleeves and casting a flirtatious glance. The ministers displayed lecherous smiles, while Xiao Yan's expression remained stiff. I danced back to the center of the stage, teasing the Beiqi ministers, making one stand up and approach me. I elegantly spun away. He fell to the ground, not only unoffended but laughing even more. The guests on both sides began to cheer. "Halhe, halhe." Xiao Yan picked up his wine cup, swallowed hard, and slammed his hands on the table, shouting, "Who dressed her like this?"
8.
The music abruptly stopped, and everyone knelt. Xiao Yan, like an enraged beast, roared, "Get out of here." As I was about to turn, he pointed at me. "You come here." Others bowed their heads and withdrew, and I slowly approached him. Xiao Yan pulled me into his embrace, took a sip from his wine cup, and kissed my lips. He pried open my teeth and poured the wine into my mouth.
No.
I was anxious, glancing at Qi Ming's retreating figure. Xiao Yan's chest heaved heavily as he bent down and carried me into the inner room, throwing me onto the bed. He bit my earlobe and said, "I don't like you dressed like this. I don't like other men looking at you with those kinds of eyes." My heart pounded wildly, tears welling up in my eyes as I looked at him. But I am a tribute girl. I must serve the general, as well as others. Then don't have any others. His passionate kiss stole my breath. I was lost in his domain, my heart aching and tight. The madam had once said that a man's love is fleeting, but his possessiveness is not. It seemed now that if Qi Ming did not expose me, I was one step closer to success.
9.
Exhausted and weakened, I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up, Xiaoyan was dressing. I took the belt from him and wrapped my arms around his waist like tendrils. "From now on, you will live here and only serve me." "Yes," I answered obediently. He tilted my chin and placed a gentle kiss on the corner of my mouth. I pulled at him. "General, will you not stay tonight?"
No.
He closed the door behind him. Chui Ping brought another bowl of contraceptive soup. She asked, "Miss, will you bathe?" "No need." Since I had already stayed, there was no rush. There would be more time in the future. "I want to take a walk in the courtyard. You don't need to follow." Chui Ping thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. I walked along the corridor, the cold wind cutting like a knife against my face, the scene of Xiaoyan on top of me replaying in my mind. I thought of Gu Jiuzhou, recalling a night when we almost spent the whole night as a couple. That day, after he returned from a palace banquet, the imperial concubine had secretly drugged him with an aphrodisiac. When Qi Ming helped him into the room, he was burning with fever, mumbling, "Get water, cold water." A bucket of cold water did nothing to relieve him. Qi Ming called a familiar doctor, who, after examining him, shook his head repeatedly. "This medicine has a time limit. The general can only endure it with willpower. But he is in severe discomfort. In that case, let him be with a woman." I pursed my lips, and Qi Ming and the doctor left, knowing the unspoken agreement. I took a deep breath. If anyone were to be with him, it might as well be me. I helped him sit on the edge of the bed. He restrained himself and said, "Wansi, what do you want to do?" "To give you the antidote." I removed my clothing and pressed close to his burning chest. Perhaps my scarred back startled him. He pushed me away with force, pulled out a dagger from under the pillow, and cut his own palm, using the pain to suppress his desire. I felt a bit humiliated, tears falling from the corners of my eyes. His voice was hoarse. "Hurry and put your clothes back on. Do you find me repulsive?"
No.
"Then why don't you want me?" "I don't want you to regret it." He took a deep breath and endured. "And I don't want to regret it either. Such matters should be mutual. The imperial concubine gave me the drug to entice me. If I took you under the pretense of needing an antidote, how am I different from her?" My heart fluttered, sticky and moist, tinged with a faint sadness. I put my clothes back on and took out the bandages from the cabinet to tend to his wound. He leaned against the headboard, eyes closed, his other hand pressing against his forehead, covered in sweat. "Why did the imperial concubine drug you?" Gu Jiuzhou was silent for a long time before answering in a low voice. "She was once my fiancée. Later, she broke off the engagement and entered the palace as a concubine. Today, she approached me alone and said she regretted it. I refused. She begged me to have a drink with her, but it's all my fault." He was always like this, blaming himself for the mistakes of others. The wind howled that night, tapping against the window, shaking my heart with each gust. At that moment, the wind seemed to roar all the way to Beiqi, and I couldn't help but shiver. A man's voice drifted in with the wind. "Miss, you're dressed too lightly." I turned around to see Qi Ming.
10.
I knew he would come to find me, but I didn't expect it to be this soon. He looked at the bruise on my neck and frowned. "How did you end up here? How did you become a tribute girl?" I spoke frankly, for Gu Jiuzhou. He was stunned and then said softly, "If the general were still alive and saw you debasing yourself like this, he would be heartbroken. I will find a way to send you back. I can't go back, Qiming. I felt a lump in my throat. When the general was alive, he respected and cared for you. Now you're lying in humiliation beneath other men. Miss Wansi, is it worth it? For Gu Jiuzhou, it is worth it. Do you want to kill Xiaoyan? I clenched my fists against the cold wind and said, yes. If I told you that the person who killed the general was not Xiaoyan, would you still want revenge? His eyes darkened a little. My heart skipped a beat. Deputy Qi, are you lying to stop me from seeking revenge? No, it was not Xiaoyan who killed the general. Xiaoyan and I, though enemies, also had a mutual respect. We fought each other, but we also admired each other. He paused and continued. At the time, General Gu was seriously ill. Xiaoyan, not wanting to win unfairly, suggested that both sides withdraw 3 miles and fight again after the general recovered. But Gu Jiuzhou never lived to see that fair battle. He died on the way back to the camp after competing in horse archery with Xiaoyan. The murderer cruelly killed him and severed his head. That person launched a night raid on Beiqi's army, resulting in a disastrous defeat. He abandoned Gu Jiuzhou's body on the battlefield strewn with corpses and secretly sent his head back to Xinjing, hanging it on the city wall. The people thought that their beloved general had lost and caused them to lose family members and the country to lose territory. Gu Jiuzhou's head, exposed to the cold northern wind, received the world's scorn. In an unnoticed corner, the real culprit wore a sinister smile. Qiming, with red-rimmed eyes, finished recounting everything and excitedly grabbed my shoulders. Miss, go back. You're not the only one who wants revenge for the general. With a whoosh, an arrow flew between us, striking the column behind. Xiaoyan stood in the shadows, not far away. Let her go. Do all generals of Nanwei have a fondness for Wansi? I stood frozen in place. He called me Wansi. He knew me. 11. Xiaoyan ordered his men to take Qiming away and drag me back to the bedroom. He swung his arm, and I was thrown over the table. The teapot and cups shattered on the floor. I fought back tears and asked him, do you know me? Did you know my identity all along? Did you do this on purpose? Xiaoyan met my gaze, his anger growing. His tone was flat. What right do you have to question me? Shui Wansi, you were the first to deceive. He sneered and pulled out a picture from his pocket, stained with blood. It was my portrait drawn by Gu Jiuzhou when I lived in the Gu residence. That day, he took me to a lantern festival where a street artist was drawing portraits. A mother and daughter sat in front of us, the little girl laughing in her mother's arms like a spring breeze. It reminded me of my childhood with my mother, and I stared at it for a long time. Do you like it? At Zuifeng Tower, the madam had also asked an artist to paint my portrait for clients to choose from. Dressed up and affected, the person in the portrait was not truly me. I wanted a unique portrait. Gu Jiuzhou gently patted me and said, I'll paint one for you another day. Do you know how to paint, General? I do. He smiled and handed me a piece of white sugar cake. I widened my eyes in surprise. He said, I saw you standing at that stall for a long time. Do you like this? Tears welled up in my eyes. I was momentarily unsure of what I wanted. My calm heart felt as if a stone had been thrown into it, creating ripples. I took a bite. It wasn't my mother's taste, but it was warm and sweet. After returning to the residence, Gu Jiuzhou set up his easel and began sketching me. I sat for an hour, my body stiff, and he put down his brush and said, I'll finish it later and give it to you. Later, I never received the painting. It turned out he carried it with him every day. The intense emotions nearly choked me and my voice trembled. Did he give it to you? He lowered his eyelids. I rushed at him, gripping his collar. Tell me quickly. I buried his body, but without the head. If it weren't for this portrait he held, I wouldn't have recognized him.
12.
How did you know this painting was his? His face darkened. He showed it off to me several times, saying it was of his beloved. The shock was overwhelming. I tried to remain calm. Did you recognize me the first time you saw me? Yes. My hands clenched into fists, my chest heaving. Why didn't you expose me? Why did you? I don't know. His eyes averted, his body trembling slightly. I couldn't believe it. Wiping away my tears, I asked, what else did he tell you? He spoke of many things between you two. He said he and Gu Jiuzhou had fought for years, with mutual respect. The battle should not have occurred. But the ninth prince had insulted the Bei-Chi princess sent for marriage. The king of Bei-Chi was enraged and ordered a night raid, capturing 3 cities in Nanwei. Gu Jiuzhou took command in the crisis and fought him. He recounted Gu Jiuzhou's pale face, saying the illness came mysteriously and warned him to be cautious of those around him. Xiaoyan said, wait until you recover before resuming the battle. They agreed to withdraw 3 miles. It was a beautiful day when Gu Jiuzhou and Xiaoyan agreed to a horse archery contest. Before the competition started, Gu Jiuzhou coughed lightly and took out a handkerchief, revealing a small portrait that fell from his chest. Xiaoyan picked it up. The portrait showed a beautiful woman with bright eyes and white teeth, her eyes like flowing water. A dignified general of Nanwei, and yet you carry this sentimental item. She is my beloved. After this battle, I will return and propose to her. 13. But he never came back. My heart felt as though it was being tightly gripped by an invisible hand, hurting so much that I could barely breathe. He had indeed promised to marry me. At the Lantern Festival, my father happened to see me with the northern general. He shamelessly showed up and called Gu Jiuzhou son-in-law. I blocked his way. What are you doing here? Get lost. Father's face darkened. So, being the general's woman means you've forgotten your father? You are the one who abandoned me. You said I was no longer a member of the Shui family. Words spoken in a family quarrel don't count, he said with a sycophantic smile that made me sick. Get lost. I don't want to see you again. We were at a standstill, and more people gathered at the Gu residence's entrance. Gu Jiuzhou smiled warmly. Miss Wanxi's contract of sale is with me. She is a member of the Gu family. Father wiped his lips. Fine. You've taken my daughter as a concubine. So give me the dowry. What dowry? My parents are both dead. I retorted angrily. Is that so? He approached and grabbed my hair, pulling down my back. You are my daughter sold to Zui Foam Tower. Look at all the scars on you. They're from the madam's henchmen beating you when you tried to escape. His words were like daggers stabbing into my heart. Gu Jiuzhou yanked him away, and he fell to the ground. He got up, continuing to hurl insults. I could no longer endure it. I drew Gu Jiuzhou's sword and pointed it at him. Get out. If I see you again, I will take your life. He spat and stumbled away, leaving in disgrace. The crowd around us continued to murmur, seemingly not satisfied with the scene. Gu Jiuzhou cleared his throat, holding my hand and said loudly, Don't worry, you're not a concubine. You are my legitimate wife. 14. I didn't take his words seriously and went to the bedroom to pack my belongings. Gu Jiuzhou followed me in. Where are you going? I can't cause you any more trouble. I need to leave. Fine, but first, eat this. He placed a bag of white sugar cakes into my hand, still warm. I noticed that his forehead was covered in sweat. He had said he was going to handle something. It turned out to be this. I don't want it. I handed it back to him. Gu Jiuzhou winced as he noticed the cut on his hand had reopened. I stared at him and he smiled. I couldn't win against those aunties. I applied medicine to his wound, feeling both angry and amused. Why does the brilliant general look like this privately? I'm human, not a god. His voice was gentle. I asked him, Does it hurt? The moonlight was cold, and the candlelight flickered. His fingers gently brushed against my fingertips. The slight itch felt like it was burrowing into my heart. As I stood up to put the medicine bottle away, Gu Jiuzhou suddenly grabbed my wrist and pointed at my neck. Wanxi, you have a wound here too. It must be from when my father had grabbed me earlier. He took the medicine from my hand. I'll help you. The heart inside my chest grew restless. He looked down, focused on his task, and I held my breath as the cold sensation and pain seeped through my skin. You don't need to leave. After applying the medicine, he stood by the door, his gaze falling on the half-packed belongings. I promised in front of so many people that I would marry you, so I will keep my word. I was stunned. He seemed to be joking. You wouldn't want the esteemed General Gu to break his promise in front of the common people, would you? But Gu Jiuzhou still broke his promise. The world is unpredictable, and I would never see the day he married me. 15. Sadness surged like a tidal wave, making my eyes moist. I told Xiaoyan, I want to leave Beiqi and return to seek revenge. He sneered. Revenge? How will you achieve it? You don't know martial arts and can't even get close to him. He approached me and gripped my chin. Or, do you want to offer yourself again? I stepped back, stepping on a shard of the broken teacup. I picked it up and faced him. Don't even think about touching me again. Isn't it good to be my woman? No, my only purpose for living is to avenge Gu Jiuzhou. He's already dead and cannot be changed. Why torment yourself? Xiaoyan advanced, and my back was pressed against the cabinet. You claimed to treat Gu Jiuzhou as a friend, yet you knew my identity. He grabbed my neck in fury. Shuewansi, are you blinded by hatred? If I hadn't recognized you when selecting tribute girls, you would have been subjected to humiliation under some man. Do you think an ordinary girl would have those peony scars on her back? Are you foolish, or am I? His face flushed, and his breathing quickened. Then suddenly, he forcefully kissed me. I pressed my hands against his chest, the broken porcelain shards cutting into my palms, with blood dripping down. The pain made me lose patience. I opened my mouth and bit his lip. Xiaoyan deepened the kiss, and the taste of blood filled my senses. He gasped and let me go. Even without that portrait, I would still choose you, he said, his voice carrying a murderous edge. I wiped the blood from my lips and sneered. You cannot touch me again, Xiaoyan. He was taken aback. I continued, unless you want to die.
16.
As Xiaoyan said, I was powerless to seek revenge. Before coming to Beiqi, I devised a plan. When I was sick as a child, my father, unwilling to spend money on a doctor, had my mother go into the mountains in the rain to find herbs. She didn't understand medicine and was afraid to administer them directly. So, she boiled the herbs into a potion for me to soak in. I did recover, and I rarely fell ill afterward. I followed my mother's method, grinding the 3 most poisonous herbs into powder and mixing them with spices for bathing. Over time, I became a poisoner. The poison would enter the body through sweat during intimate moments. Fortunately, my contact with Xiaoyan was still limited. Otherwise, he would have been poisoned long ago. He angrily grabbed my neck again. Do you think I'll let you go like this? Let you climb into the 9th prince's bed, pleasing him as you pleased me? I won't allow it. His teeth were clenched, each word deliberate. General Xiao, what kind of woman do you need? Why do you persist with me? A trace of ruthless light appeared in his eyes. Do you believe I'll throw you into the military camp to see what happens to the tribute girls who came with you? I smiled coldly. General, you don't know. I come from a brothel. What filthy things haven't I seen? With a loud crash, he smashed a wooden table, blood flowing from his wrist. Stay here, and I'll help you take revenge. Why should I trust you? Aside from Gu Jiuzhou, I trusted no one. Xiaoyan turned and pulled out a map from the bookshelf. He pointed to a red. We are here. He then pointed to the capital of Southern Wei. Within a month, I will be able to reach here. Without Gu Jiuzhou, Southern Wei is just a fragile porcelain vase. You pretend to negotiate while actually, he looked at me with shifting eyes. Attacking Southern Wei is inevitable. 17. I stayed in the Beiqi military camp, and afterward, Xiaoyan never touched me again. He instructed Cui Ping to watch over me during my baths every day. I knew what he was thinking. He wanted to rid me of the poison in my body. One day, after bathing, Cui Ping brought my sleeping clothes. She paused in midair, staring. I asked, "What's wrong?" "Miss, the peony flower on your back seems to have faded a bit." My heart lurched. After she left, I stood in front of the bronze mirror, turning my head and looking for a long time. This was the only thing Gu Jiuzhou had left me. Now, even this might be fading away. I remembered the night before he went to war. I was busy packing his belongings. He stood by the pear tree, gazing at me under the moonlight with a smile on his lips. General, aren't you coming to take a look? If you get to the camp and can't find anything, don't blame me. He smiled wider and walked over. No, whatever once he does, it pleases me. I couldn't help but snicker. I had heard him praise people, but had never seen him criticize anyone. Yet, even this good-natured person showed anger when I was publicly insulted. After packing the belongings, we planned to buy some white sugar cakes. Unfortunately, the shopkeeper closed early, and on our way back, Gu Jiuzhou disappeared. An old woman grabbed me and pointed at me, saying to those nearby, "She is a courtesan who seduced our general. A femme fatale. I've seen the scars on her back. They're very frightening. You'd better stay away from the general. If he fails in this campaign, you'll be to blame." Foolish words. This general is accustomed to the violence of war and has never been mistaken before. Wansi is kind-hearted, completely different from what you described. If anyone spreads more rumors, don't blame me for being rude. Gu Jiuzhou's gaze was stern as he led me out of the crowd. 18. Back at the Gu residence, I withdrew my hand and lowered my gaze, not daring to look at him. General, thank you for speaking up for me. Wansi. He reached to put his arm around my shoulders, but I stepped back. General, you're going to war tomorrow. You should rest early. He pulled me into his embrace. What are you afraid of? General, I have nothing to lose, so I am not afraid of anything. You, however, must not let me tarnish your reputation. How could that be? He frowned. My broken body is unworthy of you. If it's the scars you're concerned about, I have a solution. Without further discussion, he dragged me toward the study. When he picked up the paintbrush, he paused, his face turning red. I'm sorry. He gently brushed aside my hair, lifted my collar, and began painting on my back. The brush tip touched my skin, and the slight itch seemed to burrow into my heart. You shouldn't get it wet today. Tomorrow, I will have the housekeeper invite the best tattoo artist in Shengjing to fix the color so that you'll have no more scars. Why peonies? I turned to look at him. Because you are a peony. His gaze was intense, making my heart race. The next morning, as he set out for war, his face was pale. I had almost forgotten that he had been suffering from a persistent cough. He was going to war while ill. Gu Jiuzhou noticed my concern. Don't worry, the army doctor will take good care of me. Wait for my return. He lightly kissed my forehead, the only kiss we would ever share in this life. The door creaked open, and I snapped back to reality, dressing quickly. Xiao Yan stood outside. I turned to him. Is there something? Nothing. We'll attack Qizhou tomorrow. Just letting you know. Qizhou, to the west of Southern Wei's capital, if conquered, would mean the fall of Southern Wei. Spring was approaching, and the pear blossoms were about to bloom. 19. Without Gu Jiuzhou, the Southern Wei army was like a scattered sandpile. Xiao Yan quickly captured the Southern Wei capital and took the Southern Wei king prisoner. I stood among the ruins of the Gu residence, finding the pear tree in bloom. Before setting out, Xiao Yan had asked if I wanted to join him in storming the palace. I said no, just give me the 9th prince. I had other matters to attend to, not just with the 9th prince, but with many others who were responsible for this tragedy. Arriving at the Shui family's home, I saw an old, stooped man carrying firewood. The woman in the courtyard was hitting and scolding him. Old fool. Why is it taking you so long to chop wood? Beside her stood my elder brother, silent. The old man had bare legs covered in scars. Serves him right. I waited in the backyard for a long time, until dusk, until they were all asleep. Then I set everything ablaze. As smoke filled the air, I heard the old man's screams and the woman's pleas. My heart was as still as water. If it weren't for their greed, I wouldn't have ended up in Zue Foam Tower, wouldn't have met the 9th prince, and Gu Jiuzhou would still be a spirited young general. What does it matter that they are my blood relatives? They wanted to devour me clean, so it's better that I end everything myself. Covered in ashes, I returned to the temporary residence where Xiao Yan was staying. His eyes were filled with shock. I asked, "Where are they?" In the dungeon. I took a dagger from him and headed straight down.
20.
He was no longer like a prince, his hands shackled with iron chains, his eyes hollow. When he saw me, he revealed a sinister smile. So it's you. Xuewansi, you've betrayed your country. With someone like you as Emperor of Southern Wei, it would be better to destroy the country sooner rather than later. I swiftly severed his tendons. He curled up on the ground in pain, drenched in cold sweat. I trampled on him. The illness that Gu Jiuzhou suffered from, was it poisoned by you? He laughed maliciously, which I took as a confirmation. You deliberately humiliated the Bei Qi princess, incited discord between the two countries, and persuaded your father to order Gu Jiuzhou to march out with illness, secretly killing him, cutting off his head, and desecrating him.
Why?
He was loyal to the emperor and loved his country. What did he do wrong that you had to treat him this way? Some people, simply by existing, are already a mistake. Hearing his response, I kicked him hard, just as he had kicked me years ago. Shameless. Xuewansi, if you want to blame someone, blame yourself. Even if I can't get what I want, I won't allow anyone else to have it. I gripped my hand tightly, using the pain to hide the surge of hatred in my heart. You can kill me, but why did you have to take his life? He spat out a mouthful of blood. Killing you would be too easy. I want you to experience the pain of losing a loved one. Do you know, when I cut off his head, he was still alive. He begged me not to harm you anymore. What a devoted lover. He laughed maniacally. My heart felt like it had been carved into 1,000 pieces, each one being gnawed at, eroded, and pierced. With tears brimming in my eyes, I carved his flesh piece by piece. The blood on the ground accumulated more and more. The 9th prince was already dead. His tattered corpse was hung on the city wall by me. The warm sun of March quickly corroded it. A frame of white bones swayed in the wind, with no place to rest. 21. Xiaoyan came to see me and said, I've done everything I promised you. What about what you promised me? I've prepared the phoenix crown and wedding gown. I've convinced my uncle. You and my cousin are both my official wives, regardless of status. I gave his face a cold glance. I want to see someone else. The former imperial concubine of the Southern Wei Emperor. The one who betrayed Gu Jiuzhou and, along with the 9th prince, conspired against him. At this time, the concubine was nothing more than a plaything in the military camp. Her clothes were tattered, and her feet were shackled with chains. Who are you? My name is Wansi, Gu Jiuzhou's fiancé. She looked down with a sinister smile and touched the flower pin in her hair, now covered in grime. So it's you. You were the one who broke off the engagement and betrayed him first. Why did you collude with the 9th prince to persuade the emperor to send him to war? In this world, many things have no reason. I grew up with him. Childhood affection is worth little. If I had to choose, I'd rather be the woman beside the supreme ruler. A smile curled at her lips. I tightened my grip on my skirt. As an imperial concubine, how could you shamelessly drug him to stimulate him? Miss Wansi, have you ever experienced the feeling of sleeping with someone you don't love? Her voice was sharp as she questioned me. Suddenly, I recalled the days in Bei Qi and said coldly, You don't deserve to love him. If I can't have both, then I'll have to choose one. The 9th prince had no birth mother. He promised me that once he ascended the throne, he would make me the Empress Dowager. You and he are of the same age. You too. So what? What I want is the position of the harem's main consort. A fire ignited in my chest. Unable to contain myself, I rushed forward and grabbed her collar. You've already abandoned him once. Why do you have to push him to the edge? To be a victor or a loser, it's up to you to kill or mutilate me. Anyway, I've lived like a beast. Her eyes were resolute. I released her and walked outside the camp. The guard asked, Miss, should we continue? No need. Let her live in a state between human and ghost. 22. I had promised Xiaoyan that if he handed over the 9th prince to me, I would marry him. On the wedding day, I sat by the window getting dressed, wearing the phoenix crown and wedding gown. The spring breeze gently brushed by, and a few pear blossoms scattered on the windowsill. Chui Ping was about to place the red veil over me when I stopped her. Wait, I need to go somewhere. I opened the side door, walked through the alley, step by step towards the Gu residence. Seeing the situation was not right, Chui Ping ran back to get help. The pear tree branches swayed in the wind, fluttering like snow. Just as my hand touched a branch, Xiaoyan yanked me away. What are you doing? Come back and marry me. I smiled faintly at him. I miss Gu Jiuzhou. I want to see him. His expression froze. I continued. His head is buried right beneath your feet. Xiaoyan took a step back. Leave. I struggled, clutching the tree trunk. I won't leave. I want to stay here. Xiaoyan pulled hard, and pear blossoms fell like rain, filling the air with their fragrance. Back and forth, he lost patience and lifted me by the waist. No, I can't go, I said. I almost coughed up blood. Xiaoyan stopped and set me down. I spat out another mouthful of blood, splattering it on his red robe. He was stunned. Want to see you. I've taken poison. I staggered towards the pear tree, kneeling before it. My vision blurred. Gu Jiuzhou, I want to die here. With you. Xiaoyan chased after me, picking me up and shouting to the people behind him. Find a doctor? I waved my hand, saying, No, don't take me away. I want to die here. My insides ached terribly, my consciousness drifting. With a soft thud, black blood stained my wedding gown. Gu Jiuzhou, on the road to the Yellow Springs, I will be your wife.
Extra. 1.
When Xiaoyan first saw Wanxi, it was not in person but a portrait that Gu Jiuzhou had accidentally dropped. It was just a piece of paper, but he cherished it like a treasure. The woman in the painting was indeed extraordinarily beautiful. Xiaoyan asked, which noble family does she belong to? Gu Jiuzhou smiled gently. She's a commoner's daughter, but she is the best woman in the world. Xiaoyan was dismissive. Gu Jiuzhou must not have seen many women to think he had found the best.
2.
They had a contest at the stables. It was clear that Gu Jiuzhou was unwell, his lips turning bluish. He said it was an illness, but Xiaoyan suspected it was poison. Being born into the Beiqi royal family, he had seen such methods before. However, given their special statuses, he could not say it outright but merely advised him to be cautious of those around him. At the moment he mounted his horse, the small portrait fell out again. Xiaoyan asked Gu Jiuzhou, Is she really that exceptional? Worth your concern? After their subsequent meetings, Xiaoyan remembered the woman's name. Her name was Wanxi.
3.
When the military camp was attacked at night, Xiaoyan was somewhat annoyed. He had not expected Gu Jiuzhou to be so treacherous. Until the counterattack was victorious, he saw that the commander was not Gu Jiuzhou, but the 9th prince of Southern Wei. Upon hearing that Gu Jiuzhou was dead, Xiaoyan rushed to the battlefield overnight. He had fought with Gu Jiuzhou for many years and even thought of recruiting him if victorious. But to his surprise, he had died just like that. Without the portrait, he would not have recognized the decapitated Gu Jiuzhou. Xiaoyan buried him on the spot. He sighed inwardly, having lost a good opponent.
4.
The portrait was carried by Xiaoyan, changing hands several times. He wondered if the woman in the painting would cry when she heard of Gu Jiuzhou's death. When he saw Wanxi again, she stood straight before him. He was initially stunned. How did she become a tribute girl? Then a vague sense of relief washed over him. He had chosen her, and Xiaoyan told himself that it was merely to take care of Gu Jiuzhou's fiancé. But the woman did not think so. She was dressed in thin gauze, her eyes shining brightly as she looked at him. Her slender waist made Xiaoyan's cold heart suddenly tremble. He could not remain indifferent. He noticed the peony flower on Wanxi's back. He suddenly recalled Gu Jiuzhou's description of her, like a peony, beautiful yet not delicate, medicinal, and capable of healing the heart with enduring affection.
5.
After that night, Xiaoyan reminded himself not to get involved further. He thought that staying away for a few days would make him forget. But when she wore dance attire to flirt with others, a wave of uncontrollable anger made him wanna crush her. In the corridor, he overheard Wansi talking with Gu Jiuzhou's former subordinates. It turned out that this woman was here to avenge Gu Jiuzhou. She mistakenly took him for the one who killed her husband.
6.
That night, by candlelight, Xiao Yan held the portrait and stared at the bloodstains for a long time. Gu Jiuzhou, you didn't love the wrong person. She was also full of you, willing to give up her life. But in Xiao Yan's heart, an inexplicable jealousy arose. He could not bear to imagine Wansi under another man. He had to keep her. 7. On the wedding day, Xiao Yan lost his beloved. She was resolute enough to poison herself, wanting to become a ghostly couple with Gu Jiuzhou. Whether out of anger, frustration, or jealousy, complicated emotions tangled within him, leaving him sleepless. In the end, he chose to fulfill her wish, burying Wansi under the pear tree, alongside Gu Jiuzhou. If there is a next life, may you both be fulfilled. As for me, we shall not meet again. End of the text.